So today's topic is three premeditated murders that happened in Afghanistan between 2009 and 2010 by a set of US troops, nicknamed the Kill Team. This nickname did come from the media. This is what they called themselves, or at least the sergeant, the ringleader, Calvin Gibbs, called themselves. I'm not sure the rest of them was on board, but you can hear one of the people involved actually talk about it in his testimony to military when it was coming out. And, the reason this stuck out to me from the book I was reading about Afghanistan, recommend the book, was that these are premeditated murders, meaning pre-planned. It's a time of war and they're pre-planning murders, which actually, led to the prosecution of the people involved in different sorts of levels. And, during war, it's going to be death. There's going to be accidental killings of civilians when you're chasing a legitimate target, faulty intelligence, get in the wrong house for a raid, and, key comes down, think he's getting burgled, he ends up getting killed, or even an airstrike. But that's a bit different when you're dropping a massive bomb on an area. You're going to get the area surrounding it, which is why they called it collateral damage, which, is kind of like, well, it's for the greater good. We might have killed a couple innocent people, but, we got this guy, or we tried to get him. This was premeditated murders. And, also stuck out because this guy, the sergeant who was the ringleader, he collected the fingers of the victims. And, that sort of just stuck out to me. When I think of that, I think of, he's collecting these fingers to make a finger necklace, and when I think of that, I think like some film or cartoon, some Australian guy. He's got a nice necklace of like crocodile teeth. The crocodiles he killed, it's half a joke, but he's actually gone and done it. And he's even gone out his way to make sure they don't decompose, to make sure they stay, fresh looking, or like half fresh, as good as they can look when they're dead, really. And there's war trophies, and even in fiction, in Dexter, he's got his blood slides, and I'm sure many people collect from their killing, or maybe their first one. You might get it. You're in the army, and you get your first kill, and you might swipe the watch or something off them, so you could remember it. And when someone sees it, it's just a watch. But like when someone sees this, they're like, mate, you've got fingers on a necklace. I don't know if he actually wore it, but anyway, this caught my attention, obviously, as it would. This then, led to me finding the documentary in 2013. It was filmed about these murders, involving actually the people involved in the murders. So there's also a film in 2019. Haven't watched it. I wanted to watch this first. If that's more your style, watch the film. I plan to watch it, but it's actually got the people involved in the murders. And what's so great about this documentary is, you read the articles at the time, a couple of their testimony, and it matches up, to what they're actually saying in the documentary. They've had a couple of years to reflect on it, but the events have stayed the same. So I recommend watching the whole documentary. I want to show some clips, around the murders and sort of what they said, and some stuff about the army. So the main people involved. So you got the sergeant, who's the ringleader. Unfortunately, he is not in the documentary. You've got Jerry Morlock, Andrew Holmes, Adam Winfield, all in the documentary. There's a few more people involved in the prosecutions. Some weren't for murder, some were just for assault and other things like that. Justin Stoner, he's also in the documentary. He was not actually involved in the murders. He actually just, he got the case going, but it was because basically he was getting annoyed them for smoking hash in his room, and he did not want them to, basically. So there's different levels. So you got the sergeant who got the most, 3 counts of premeditated murder, same as Jerry Morlock. They also got charges of conspiracy because, it was pre-planned, because they conspired, And then you've got Andrew Holmes, who pled to just murder without premeditation, sort of just meaning he was there. He didn't actually plan it like the others. And Adam Winfield, who, you feel a bit sorry for him, because he actually reports the first killing to his dad. You know, he tells him, he's like, this is messed up, I want to do something about it. His dad goes to the army. He basically gets told it's his word against his. He can't really do much about it. And then he actually gets caught up in the third murder. So he ends up he pleads to manslaughter. I think it was actually involuntary manslaughter. Basically means he didn't stop it. You know, he could have stopped it. He fired some bullets. Whether they hit it or not, we're not sure. So I'm going to focus on the clips about the killings, you know, the other bits about the war trophies and the culture of the army, things like this, but a bit more background on the documentary. So it focuses around a bit more Adam Winfield, his family, in the case. I'm not going to focus on that, but it's still an important part of the story. You know, they're all pretty young. You know, they all kind of joined the army straight after high school. I think you listen to them speak, they seem just like me or you, and you just wonder how, you know, how do you get to that point where they've pre-planned it? You know, there's lots of times to kill in the army, and they've actually gone out their way to do it, whether they was bad or not. As Jeremy Morlock said, you know, they're either Taliban or not Taliban, or they're not working with us, sort of was the attitude. But when you hear them speak, how you know, how do you get to that point? They're pretty normal people. And you know, they all have different levels of complicity, sorry. But you know, when you're in a war, you have to dehumanize the enemy, maybe a bit yourself, and you're sort of around everything around you in the media and your superiors, especially the media. You know, World War One, you got babies on bayonets for the Germans, you know, dehumanize the Germans. They're doing these horrible things, whatever you think about, you know, the Kaiser or whatever, and World War One. And then World War Two, you know, the Nazis completely dehumanize the Jews, where like this, you got 4 young men, and you're thinking, how, you know, 3 young men, sorry, how do you get, you know, involved in that? Well, how did a whole society of Germans end up joining the Nazis, or, you know, just letting it go, or, you know, because it's been dehumanized. And unfortunately, you know, after 9/11, the Muslims and those sort of countries have been dehumanized quite a lot. I mean, there's about 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. Think about how few terrorist attacks there actually are compared to that number. There's going to be bad Muslims, and there's going to be bad people in the army. Not everyone who joins the army is a bad guy, but you can, you know, lead to bad things with the culture and the normalization. There's also, you know, a little bit of a colonial mindset of, in a few different aspects. One being, you know, they're kind of backwards people. They're goat herders. They're all kind of, you know, they're not in a westernized society, and that can sort of lead to, you know, you being there because you feel like you can be there, because it's sort of like, you know, the British you know, missionaries, they think, you know, their religion's better and they have the best intentions, or even, you know, the biggest imperialists, you might have said, you know, where they're giving certain governments self-determination, the others, they're like, oh no, they're too backwards, the moment we've got to be here. So there's different aspects of, you know, why people are there, but there is a slight, you know, they're backwards people, and, you know, the way they sort of ended up killing them, they probably wouldn't have done that in a Western country and thought about the same. Just a little background on the kills, without the murders, without actually ruining it. So they would pre-plan it, not really care if they're, you know, bad or not, basically, because they're like, well, they don't see them really as people, and they basically set them up. Like Adam Holmes sort of speaks about how it wasn't told by his superiors, but in the army, always pick up a spare gun in case you got to drop it on a civilian to make him look more guilty. That's one thing, you know, just covering up an accidental death, you know, not justify it, but, you know, you could see someone doing that, and it's still not great, obviously. They like pre-planned murdering, just don't care if they're bad or not, and then basically bring a grenade and a spare one, throw a grenade, say grenade, bang, shoot him, plant the other grenade, and say, you know, here, you know, you tried to attack us or whatever. This is, I don't want to ruin it, but it was the sergeant who sort of brought these ideas to them. There's a lot you can say about the Afghanistan war, the justification for the invasion and the continued occupation until obviously about a year ago. How much was spent alone, you know, how much aid money went there, the corruption of the government, the Afghan security forces. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on the clips for this documentary of these premeditated murders. There's 3 that we know about, whether there's more or not. As I said, they was actually prosecuted for this. But one thing we can talk about is, since the Afghanistan wars ended and throughout, people sort of discussed how, the mission was unclear. They didn't really have a plan. They were sort of just there for the sake of being there after a while, and there was not a clear mission. Like, whatever you think of the Gulf War and defending the Kuwaiti dictatorship family, that aside, the mission's clear: get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. There was no clear mission for this. After 9/11, they went there to hunt the Taliban and Al Qaeda, but they don't have a uniform. They're not an army, so you're sort of harassing more, which they discuss. And that they went there for certain reasons, thinking it's going to be a proper war. And around 2009 to 10, it's kind of more nation building. Jerry Morlock, who is the sort of second person most guilty after Sergeant, discusses how they go to a village and they'd ask questions, sort of harass them, or building a well, and they didn't like them building a well. Well, if you're an Afghan citizen and some guy's occupying, you're like, well, what are you doing? And, come to build a well. Then why are you like in your army uniforms? Like, well, why do you need to build a well? Why don't you just come here during, like, as an aid worker or an NGO? If you want to help us and build a well. But soldiers, their first ability is killing. Maybe they can build a well down 4 strengths down, but it doesn't make any sense. And it still doesn't justify what they did. They just, the media sort of portrayed it as killing for sport. It wasn't killing for sport, it was killing for the sake of it, and because you could get away with it. And the sergeant basically told a story of how he could, and it's pretty easy. So they were trying to get their first kill, basically. And, it's strange to us who aren't in the army, but I guess it's important. I think, if I was in the army and I went there for all the right reasons and I killed a genuine bad guy, that, you'd want to get that first kill out of the way to start, normalizing emotionally. But if you, just want to get a first kill for the sake of getting a first kill, come on, you're in a war. And although it might be not what you thought, wait, are you that eager, But anyway, just to go into our first clip, it's kind of alludes to, the lack of mission. And Justin Stoner, who, was the one who sort of brought the case to, it sort of alludes to something quite interesting. So I'm just going to play this clip.
Boring as fuck.
So, here we are, middle of nowhere, Afghanistan.
Yep.
Been out here about 3 days now. This sucks a lot.
I expected climbing mountains and firefights every day and staying out for days at a time, and it really wasn't anything like that.
You drive out to a village, find a local elder, a mullah, whatever, and the LT asks them some questions, and then you drive back.
Oh, fuck. Here's an ID. 1-2.
The hell are we, risking our fucking necks for? Driving across the desert, waiting for a buddy to get blown up, just to go ask some old dude some questions? Like, for what,
Patrolling the streets of, where are we?
We are in Tabin A. Ulia.
Tabin A. whatever.
Yeah.
We're in Afghanistan.
Great place. Lots of friendly people here want to kill us.
Our biggest fear is stepping on landmines
Yeah, look at the ground.
or pressure plates. We gotta walk around all day, making sure we don't hit any IEDs.
We've been training to do one thing all this time, counter guerrilla stuff and, being a warrior and going kicking ass. And then you get there and we're forced to go and help them and build them a well, a school, or whatever. To do any offensive operation, you needed the top fucking signature from, whoever, Big Dog General or President Karzai himself.
You can't shoot somebody because of this reason. You can't do it because of that reason. They blow you up and you see them driving away. It was nothing like what everybody hyped it to be. And part of that's probably why, you know, things happened.
So, as you can see there, the first person who spoke was Jerry Morlock about, you know, the wells and what they went there for and what it was. And Justin Stoner was the last one to speak, who, you know, initiated the case, sort of alludes to at the end of, you know, why things ended up happening. Again, it doesn't justify it, but, you know, he wasn't involved in many of the killings, and a lot of the stuff he said throughout the documentary is really interesting. I mean, still, again, look how young they are. They seem kind of normal. As the documentary goes on, you'll see pretty normal guys, and you almost feel sort of sympathy for what happened. I mean, Jerry Morlock speaks a bit differently about it. Andrew Holmes, who's only involved in one, is a bit more sensitive, I guess, when he talks about it. And Adam Winfield's completely like broken up about it. Justice Stoner seems to have, he wasn't actually involved in the killings, but he just watch out for what he says. So as I said, the guy, basically he's collecting fingers and things like that. And you just gotta wonder, like, the mindset, you know, like I said, some people could join the army for the most patriotic reasons ever. But, you know, some people, if you're a psychopath and you want to kill for the state legally, what's better than joining the army or an intelligence agency? But this psychopath couldn't even bother to wait to kill legally. They killed illegally just for the sake of it. And the next clip is basically going to be about, you know, discussions they had and previous things he had. So Sergeant Gibbs was in Iraq before, and it's not actually in this clip, but he has 6 skulls on the back of his leg. And Andrew Holmes, you know, asked, what was that? He didn't answer. He was then told by someone else it was the guys he killed. So this guy from the start is an interesting character. Everyone in the platoon sort of knew this was going on and had his respect, which is why, again, Adam Winfield felt he didn't want to talk about it. But I don't want to ruin what the sergeant basically said he did in Iraq, and then the ideas that flowed for conspiring and pre-planning these killings. This is the next one about the killings.
We just get to know each other, shooting the shit. You know, hey, what was your last deployment like? He spoke specifically about one incident I remember. We were just getting to know each other, shooting the shit. You know, hey, what was your last deployment like? He spoke specifically about one incident I remember. He was in Iraq. He was a saw gunner, and he was crossing the road, I don't know, and a car was coming at him and didn't stop. So he opened up on the car, and it ended up being a family. I think a mother and father and a small child was killed. He could have stopped the vehicle or let him go by, and nothing would have came of it, but he described it to me as like he was looking for that opportunity for a while and had been.
Because that could have been something very easily turned around and justified. You could easily justify that situation. They were charging. There was no one there to see anything different.
He's like, oh yeah, dude, I just said this and it was cool and no one questioned it. And, you know, it was that easy. So that was like the first step, which ultimately ended up leading into our own conversations about how we could maybe implement things in that sort of same way. The first conversation was based around the idea of a drop weapon.
I've always heard about people, you know, in Iraq or Afghanistan or whatnot, when you find a weapon, you know, you hold on to it in case you need it, in case, you know, a civilian gets hit and you need to drop it on them so they're not, you know, they don't look innocent.
During one of our smoke sessions, Morlock brought up the fact that he could get easy kills by setting people up. He just said he'd been talking with Sergeant Gibbs, and he was telling him how he could get a kill. Just buy a hand grenade off the books, that's all you need.
The idea he kind of pitched me was like, well, hey, dude, I've got a couple extra grenades that aren't being tracked. So the idea, we could say, was we were approached by a local, a bad guy, was what we'll call him, and he approached us. He either threw the grenade at us or we noticed the grenade in his hand, and we detonate the grenade to make it look like this guy was attacking us, and we had to take him out. Who in their right mind is going to think that we made this up? You know what I mean? It's a believable enough situation to where who's going to question it? You know what I mean? So you're just like, well, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it doesn't sound, yeah, we could pull that off. On our minds, we've been here for months, and nobody's innocent because these guys either know the Taliban, they're either working with them, and they're not working for us, and we're here to help them, and they don't give us any help. We're just getting blown up every time we go out there to, just to talk with them or build them a well. So fuck them.
Ever since I made my first statement, it's just been fear of the guys from my platoon. I get nightmares about that, even just them hunting me. And it's always back over there, too.
It's back in the theater.
It's never in the States. I'm always over there. In the last year, I felt kind of as the enemy of the platoon because I was one of the few that come clean.
And do you die in these nightmares? You do?
Mm-hmm.
How do they kill you?
They blow me up mostly. Normally it involves a grenade. A couple times it's been like blunt objects. And it's just, I never even have a chance to run from them. It's just, they always catch me. I've said some incriminating things about some of these guys, and it's not hard for me to believe that they would want some sort of retribution. And that's the worst part about it. The same people that I was been in fear of the last year are also the same people that, I've lived with the last 4 years. These people were my friends, and at some point in time, they were also willing to lay their life down for me. And I have to remember that.
Specialist Winfield, do you understand that you are still under rights advisement, as you were advised of your rights earlier, and you indicated that you did not want an attorney? Before you went out on patrol, do you remember any discussion ahead of time involving Sergeant Gibbs? Like, did he ever set a scenario?
The only scenario that really had been discussed was just simple drop weapon type stuff.
Did that ever happen to your knowledge? Yes. A drop weapon?
Yes.
Can you tell me when and where that may have happened?
First time was in maybe January or February in La Mohammed, Calais. There was an incident with a grenade.
That day, we had our high-ups on the top of the hill talking to the village elder.
Myself and Holmes found ourselves kind of secluded from the majority of the platoon, and it's like, hey man, let's see if we can get one of those guys over there. There's a guy farming in the field. And so we talked about specifics, what was going to happen. Hey, this guy was coming towards us. We told him to stop. He didn't listen to our commands. Holmes identified something in his hand. He thought it was a grenade. Threw something at us, and so we engaged him and took cover behind the wall, and that's what we talked about.
As I'm standing back up, getting ready to look back over, and I have, Morlock screaming in my ear, grenade. Holmes, shoot him.
Pulled the grenade, dropped it, got down, yelled at Holmes, fire, which, seemed like a fucking eternity.
I had 5 seconds from the time that pin falls off from the grenade until it will explode.
He let off a burst from a saw. I pulled his ass down, grenade goes off.
A lot of confusion, a lot of dust come up, heard more when I looked over to my left, because that's where Morlock was. He had his back against the wall, and he has his radio, and he's yelling, he's telling everyone, contact, contact, contact.
I just heard contact and thought we got contact. And then as soon as I heard the description of what happened, it all clicked. That he just said that someone tried to throw a hand grenade at him and Holmes, and they shot him. And that was the same scenario he explained to me.
And I look over and I ask him, do we re-engage? Do we get back up and, shoot the guy or whatnot? And Morlock didn't answer me. He just stood back up, looked over at the guy who was on the ground, you know, pulled up his M4 and just pop, 2 more shots.
I mean, he didn't register as a person. He was just, you know, there. I was excited. You know, me and Holmes both kind of were. I mean, like I said, it plays that whole, you know, ideology of the infantry world. It was just like, fuck, right on, man. We got to kill, whether, you know, we knew he's a bad guy or not.
So they brought the father down, the brother down. They said, well, do you know this guy? And the guy goes, yeah, that's my son. You know, and the brother's sitting there, and they're both just crying, you know. We then put him in a black body bag and took him to the top of the village and strapped him down to the front of one of the strikers. And we took him back to the fob, jumped back in the truck. You know, we're all hyped up on all this freaking adrenaline and just not knowing what's going to happen next. And we get back to the fob, and you know, it was like I was looked upon like a hero.
They were getting all the applause. Everybody was, you know, giving them high fives and handshakes, and you know, telling them they're, you know, made men, and you know, everyone needs to look up to them. And you know, I knew differently, and everybody else knew differently too, but it was accepted.
Anybody with half a brain can go, oh, okay, you guys set this guy up to get shot. Whatever. I didn't care.
And I remember we were smoking, we were high, and Morlock's like, man, you know, we straight murdered that dude.
I mean, there you have it, them talking about it. Justin Stoner, Adam Winfield, clear as day. They both knew it was, you know, a setup. Platoon, you know, they come back, they get high fives, and they're excited. You know, you'd think, I understand the adrenaline aspect because it's danger, but you know, they're excited. And think that was the first one. And Morlock, the one who spoke first, is involved twice again. You'd think after the first one of them, the dad and the brother coming down like crying, and you realize, oh my god, like he obviously said he didn't see it as a person. You know, going back to that dehumanized, maybe colonial, maybe just dehumanized mindset. But surely the second they start crying, kick into reality, and like, oh, even if he was a bad person, you know, the emotion that his family's feeling, you caused that. But then, you know, like they said, they're going back, they're getting high fives, everyone, you know, you're a made man. This, you know, almost encouraged. And the fact that he took a photo, sorry about that, should have warned a graphic image was coming up. I don't know about YouTube skylines. Obviously that, he's glorifying that. I'm reporting on that. And you think, you know, if you committed a murder anytime out of war and you planned it, would you take a photo? You know, obviously he's that proud and that, you know, separated from what he did. He was happy to take a photo of, you know, a crime. I mean, he'd be the stupidest killer ever. You're like, oh, how do we catch him? Well, he took a photo with it, smiling, maybe even posted it, you know, and boasted about it. And I know it's different conditions because it's sort of like it's out in a country during a war, and they can get away with a lot more. But the last thing you'd want to do is have evidence of you being, you know, proud of it. But that just, you know, exemplifies their mindset of it. You know, the way they both speak is definitely different. Holmes is definitely a bit more sensitive about it. It's a few years after the murder. I'm not sure how Morlock feels about it. He still, you know, throughout it seems like a normal person. I don't know if he's just speaking about it pretty honestly, but it's, yeah, really strange, you know, high fives. And if most of them knew it was obviously you've just killed an innocent person, or like you didn't check, definitely wouldn't be high-fiving him after that, and he's probably showing a photo. But anyway, there's a lot to be said there, but I'm gonna go into the next clip. The fingers, the war trophies. I'm sure you'll.
Gibbs, like a couple hours after we got back. He's like, "Hey, Holmes, come check this out." So I walked in the tent back to his room, and he pulls out a little piece of cloth inside of a bag, and he pulls out a finger, and he's like, "This is from your guy."
His idea behind it was he was going to take the fingers and then let them decompose and then take the bone and make a finger bone necklace out of it. And you're like, yeah, well, fuck, looking at it, it's like, all right, that's pretty fucking crazy, dude. But at the same time, like, our mindsets are not on the normal level of everybody else's. And so it's just, you know, I mean, war trophies have been, you know, since the Bible, and they cut Solomon's head off, you know what I mean? So it's just like, and then we're there and you're seeing blood and gore all the time, and then it's war, and you're just like, all right, well, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to make a fucking bone necklace, but if you want one, man, whatever, that's cool. It's your fucking thing. Go for it.
I just thought, what happened to these guys? What happened to the guys that I knew? Why are they all okay with this? Why isn't anyone stepping up? Like, why am I the only one that's not okay with this? Why is it just me?
I mean, there you have it again. It's showing the layers of. You might look at Jeremy Morlock and think, you know, he doesn't look the most remorseful about doing it. You know, he took a photo at the time, and the way he's talking about it, yeah, he just doesn't. And then you look at Holmes, who, you know, it looks like he's not best pleased with his previous behavior. And then you've got the sergeant, who's obviously not in this, telling, you know, showing about the fingers, and he's making a finger bone necklace. And Jerry Morlock, even, you know, the guy's on another level to him, you know. It's just so strange, you know. And you can see in other clips later, again, photos with them, and apparently it's just quite normal, you know, other soldiers and stuff, you know, they get their DVD discount, you know, I killed this guy, I killed this guy. I get it if, you know, you're the guy who killed Bin Laden or Pablo Escobar, and you got a photo of him, you know, because it's like a memory of you made a difference, you killed the bad guy, but like getting a photo of just some guy you killed, even if it was like the Taliban, like, it's not, oh, like, you're in their country for one, they're the native, we're not going to go into that, but like, I wouldn't say it is the most heroic thing, unless they obviously believe that they was, you know, involved with 9/11 or how, I don't know how they actually thought about it in their head, but I get it with a big name. Even if you had, you know, their head chopped off and you had Pablo Escobar's head, you know, he's obviously an awful person, you know, the amount of people he killed. But, you know, sharing photos of just, that's weird. It's almost like sharing your KD on COD. I'm not saying Call of Duty makes this normalized. I'm a fan of Call of Duty, but it almost is, you know, look at my KD, look how many guys I've killed. Oh, here's some photos. That's nice. That's very, very, very strange. So the next clip I had was about Adam Winfield, who's sort of the one that centered in the documentary, who, you know, told his dad and, you know, went on to tell the military, and he gets caught up in it. I'm not going to show that because I don't want this to be like an hour, and I don't want to take everything from the documentary because it is about 114 minutes. This, you know, I'll probably show like 20 minutes of clips. Again, can't recommend the documentary enough. And one of my annoying face in there, and you can, you know, build up the tension. So I'm going to show you another video about the second kill and sort of, you know, the culture of sharing these photos. So anyone who doesn't like graphic content, pictures, don't look at it. I'm not glorifying it, and yeah, definitely wouldn't be doing it myself. So let me just load up the next one. So obviously the first one, you know, drop the grenades, done the thing that, you know, they spoke about, how just easy, you know, think about as well the fact that they took a photo and how brazen it is. Well, maybe it's not brazen because, you know, they just know they can get away with it. And they sort of talked about later how this thing isn't, you know, it's common more than you'd think. It's not you know, they're portrayed as like a rogue unit, but this stuff happens all the time. So I guess you can be that brazen, take a photo and just set them up because, you know, you're the bigger superpower. What are they going to do about it, basically? And is their word against theirs, especially when you've, you know, dropped a weapon on them. You know, it's just that easy. But I'm going to show another clip.
Time went on, and the second murder happened, which at first I didn't even know it was a murder again. I thought this was a real engagement. I heard Morlock and Sergeant Gibbs joking and talking about it, and I found out what really happened. Set up a kill with an AK, shot a dude, just, cold blood, dropped the AK next to him, and said it was a legit shoot. It seemed like everything was falling apart, from the seams. My whole unit, my whole just concept of the military and honor and integrity and just, the image you get from a soldier, what you would expect a soldier to be.
About to get ready to show you what Apaches do to fucking bodies, all right?
He won't be walking, that's the problem.
It's good shit. It's dead as a motherfucker. Go ahead.
Film that shit, man.
Everybody had their own cameras and, take a picture of your little combat experience. Sure, why the hell not? You sit down with all your squad leaders or, other guys, and they all bust out their DVDs and discs of their prior deployments and, hey, look at these dead guys we killed here. Death and dead bodies and bloods and gore and, that thing just, you get taught to be the norm and be okay with it. I was pissed at everything. I was pissed at the whole situation. What's the point of all this? And the thing that really got me was from other stories I've heard from people from other units. I knew that this stuff happens I knew that it was happening really more than people were letting on.
See, this is where you can see Adam Winfield's kind of different. And again, that's the second killing that he's still not involved in. I'm not going to show you the third one because, again, there's you can watch that in the documentary. But as you can tell, he signed up for the army for legitimate reasons. He thought he was doing the right thing, as many would. And as I was saying, different people join the army for different reasons, same as these, Islamic groups. Like, there's the people in the Islamic State truly in it for religious reasons because they want to bring back the times of Muhammad and the really strict, writings they have. And then there's some who just like killing, just like the power. Like after the Iraq War, a lot of the Ba'athist soldiers who worked for Saddam Hussein all fired, and they end up, later working with the Islamic State. They're not like religious like that. They just, want a job. They like killing and they like the power. Some people join the military for they truly believed they're going there to defend their country because of what happened in 9/11 or whatever it was, and they have the best intentions, and they end up in something like this. Or you have, generally just like imperialist who wants to sign up because he likes the power, playing the great game with Russia, etc., dominance, and wants to go down, as an empire. But again, you can almost feel sympathy for him because he gets caught up in it, obviously, not justifying his action. But, because of the documentary sort of centered around him as well, so it's kind of, you're going to feel more sympathy. Obviously, the people you need to feel the most sympathy for, obviously, the Afghans who were killed and their families, who are always, it's always when, people talk about, especially America, the only time people start getting annoyed about the war is when they keep hearing about the civilian casualties. Sorry, not civilians, the soldiers, the American soldiers have been killed. As long as not too many being killed, it can fly under the radar, the media doesn't have to report on it. but it's never about, the people getting killed there in Yemen or wherever it is. It's always the soldiers, and then people start getting annoyed. They're the ones who need to be remembered and sympathized with. And as you can see, he sort of talks about losing faith in the army, and that leads us nicely into the last clip, where sort of talks about the military culture. Morlock sort of talks about the photos element, but this is about stuff goes on more than you hear. And Justin Sterner says some really interesting things, considering he wasn't involved in any of it. Again, I'll tell you to watch the documentary, because there's the parts about, the threats to him and Adam Winfield when they think they're going to talk about it, and literally the sergeant goes up to him and basically pulls out the fingers and says, you could be one of them on there if you go too far. He ends up getting beaten up and stuff. So definitely watch the documentary. Those clips were just a small snippet into it, but this leads us nicely into the last clip.
So is that. You're stronger than me.
I've already been through the worst of this. It's over right now.
It doesn't matter what, you know what? They can't do anything else to you. It's over.
Exactly. It's all done. It's all over.
I find myself thinking sometimes, how are you going to tell this story later on? Somebody told me a way to look at it is it's not that you're a murderer, you were convicted of murder. I mean, my squad there initially after the first incident was like, fuck, welcome to the club, Morlock. You're a grown-ass man now. And that's what every infantryman's looking for. They're looking to fulfill their job, fulfill, the way of life of an infantryman. And so, your superiors in a way kind of become your father figures. They become the guys that you most want to impress. And this was a way to do it.
I was 19, fresh out of high school. I thought I knew everything that there was to know, but man, I was really, really wrong. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think, because these were the guys that I was walking into combat. I was doing patrols with these guys, and I didn't want them to, think different of me.
Training you from the day you join to the day you're out to kill. Your job is to kill. Your infantry. Your job is to kill everything that gets in your way. Well, then why the hell are you pissed off when we do it? I never want to be referred to as a whistleblower, as it's worse than what they're being portrayed as. If I could go back, I wouldn't have said anything. Everything we did was put into the media as we're horrible, we're the kill team, we're road platoon, we're all these things. I don't care what the military wants to say, but this goes on more than just us. We're just the ones that got caught.
There was no way for me not to be a part of it. There's no way not to be surrounded by Gibbs. There's no way not to be pressured into these things. The constant pressure of having to kill, and then the risk of being killed yourself. It was impossible not to surrender to the insanity of it all.
think about it a lot. The war, all the stuff that the guys in my platoon were doing. I never understood it. Even now, I don't understand. I know I'll never understand, I guess. War is dirty. It's not how they portray it in movies where, you know, there's just a bunch of honorable men with, you know, unshakable patriotism. It's just a bunch of guys with guns.
How would you describe that?
The incident? Or
Yeah, just the incident and how you felt from it.
It's pretty much the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I took a man from his family, and I don't know if it was my bullets that killed him or the grenade that killed him, but I was still part of it.
I'm going to leave it there. As you can see, he's getting tearful there. But again, it was interesting to see what Justin Stoner said. So basically, he wished he wouldn't have come out if he's going to kill the whistleblower. Because, I mean, I'm kind of being part of this and was a paradox because I'm blowing up as the kill team. I just thought it was interesting how it was just premeditated. But he, you know, obviously said that he'd rather not come out because they was being portrayed as the rogue unit, you know, the kill team, that platoon, when it happens all the time and it just goes under the radar, it's covered up, you know. There is a point where obviously the US military probably wants to, you know, sweep stuff under the rug. I'm sure they have lots of internal, like the interviews you saw there with the army. I'm sure there's loads of those that are classified. These obviously they're actually prosecuted. You know, not normally a lot of war crimes do not get prosecuted, but these were just so clearly intentional, and there's no way you could. And because one of them obviously came out and that they actually couldn't really get obviously away with it. But I'm going to leave it there. Make your judgments on each of them. Again, watch the documentary, watch the film, read the book Fool's Errand that mentions it, and it's about Afghanistan more. There's loads of things we're going to talk about. Hopefully, I'll do some videos on it soon. Obviously, at the moment, my production's about as amateur as Kim Kardashian's sex tape. Hopefully, this will be spiced up a bit more over the long run. Check out my website. It's got loads of quotes, books, recommended like media alongside. I got stuff on the war on terror. I've got a whole quote sheet on Afghanistan, loads of interesting stuff there. But it's been a pleasure, and good night.